On this episode of Failure to Launch, we're going to check out the urban horror film Bones, and we're going to try and figure out why it was only one film and was not a series. This is probably one of the more obvious attempts at creating a new horror icon to turn into a franchise and series, and it just never panned out. So let's take a look and see if we can find out why. So the dog got his bones back in 2005 with Bones, which starred Emily Deschanel and David Boreanaz. Right. So the dog got his bones back in 2001 with Bones, which was directed by Ernest Dickerson, who also gave us the magnificent Demon Knight. It kicks off in 1979 and introduces us to Jimmy Bones, and then bounces us forward to present day, which we're assuming to be 2001. A group of young wannabe club owners buy Jimmy's old place, and Tia here, who knows a thing or two about people in the form of animals, finds a wild dog and feeds it, which, I guess, frees Jimmy's soul. I'm not sure if it was the dog getting the food or this guy messing with the pipes, but whatever, Jimmy comes back. But not really, he starts to come back. It's a long process. Foxy Brown shows up and they take the dog home, and evil cop Lubavitch shows up with some of the worst makeup I've ever seen. I mean, is this makeup, or was the actor eating pancakes before the shoot and just pressed them against his cheeks? I hope that's not his actual skin, or I'll feel really bad. I'll feel really bad about those comments. Things get surreal and they find Jimmy's skeleton and steal his ring. And okay, I guess now, this brings him back. And then they do a seance, which riles him up even further because there's everything in this one leading up to Jimmy actually, coming back. So back in 79, Jimmy gets double-crossed and killed, and in the present finally kills his first victim, although we had already seen the dog kill people in the beginning, and they didn't cause him to reform, but for some reason this one does. And Jimmy's skeleton slowly heals up. Then, this happens.
Gangsta in love don't eat no fried chicken.
And then finally, 1 hour and 3 minutes in, Jimmy Bones finally shows up to his own movie. They steal the maggots from the ceiling bit from Suspiria, and Jimmy's let loose on the world. It's revealed that Jimmy is Cynthia's dad, and he starts getting revenge, including a wisecracking head, and everyone ends up in Jimmy's place as everything gets ghosty. Jimmy gets the Buffy vamp face.
Surprise, nigga!
And Cynthia realizes that his blood on her dress is what anchors him to this world, so she burns it, and wow, that dress is flammable. I think that they should look into a recall or something. Jimmy grabs her, but they both burn, and Cynthia and Patrick escape, but it's clear that Jimmy's spirit survives, setting us up for a sequel. But one never came, so here's the point where we say, why not? Well, this may be the easiest episode yet because there's about 60 reasons. First and foremost, it only costs $16 million to make, which is a fairly low budget for a new line theatrical release even in 2001, and yet only managed to pull in around $8 million in its theatrical run. I mean, its opening weekend was a mere $2.8 million, and it debuted at number 10 at the box office, right underneath Corky Romano. That's right, the opening weekend of Bones did worse than the third weekend of the comedy stylings of Comedy Cancer Chris Kattan. It faced some heavy competition with 13 Ghosts happening that weekend as well, and audiences chose that instead of Killer Snoop, and that brings us to the next reason. Hate to say it, but Snoop Dogg fails as a horror villain here because he's, Snoop Dogg. He's so recognizable as his music persona that it is a tough task to overcome that without some serious acting chops, and let's face it, he's basically just himself with some Freddy-like one-liners and doesn't really muster up any menace necessary to be a villain. When you see him, you just see Snoop.
That's beautiful, baby. Totally widescreen, sci-fi, forward-thinking. And I can dig that.
Picture Snoop Dogg in your head, and I want you to think of the first word that comes to mind. Was that word evil? Scary? It wasn't, was it? He's fine in the 1970s scenes because he's pretty much just supposed to be himself, but as soon as we get to the present and he has to be evil, it's less evil and more chill. Speaking of chill, let's talk about this film's pacing. Very little happens for so very long here. It takes Jimmy Bones an hour to appear, except in flashbacks. They throw in some spooky elements to foreshadow Jimmy coming back, and there are some decent visuals. I mean, the guy that made The Demon Knight knows decent visuals, and there's a few on display here. But it can't seem to decide whether to be a ghost story or a slasher revenge flick or some sort of horror comedy. The tone is all over the place with the decapitated comic relief heads, and it can't seem to commit to its blaxploitation roots. And then you throw in the bland performances from most of the cast, and the odd way that they just kind of write Catherine Isabel out of the final act, even though she's one of the main characters in the first. And then there's some really lackluster special effects, and you know, I guess some bones are just kind of better left buried. So there you have it. It's one movie that desperately wanted to be more. You could really tell that they kind of wanted to get further into the story of Jimmy Bones, and this was supposed to just be the beginning. And it pretty much died right on the spot, and it's pretty obvious why. This one just suffered from not having enough of anything. It didn't have enough horror, it didn't have enough special effects, it didn't have enough story, it didn't have enough comedy. It just didn't go the distance. Like, it just felt like it wanted to be safe and simple and kind of just toe the line and be a very marketable movie. And the problem is that it just was too middle of the road for anything else. I mean, horror fans, I think, are a little bit more savvy sometimes with that kind of a thing, and we're quite aware that this was just a very middle of the road movie. 13 Ghosts, which debuted in the same weekend, was also kind of a little bit more the middle of the road storyline, but it had way more over the top visuals and way more over the top violence, and was a much more interesting movie overall, which I'll probably end up covering that movie in one form or another eventually. But right now I'm doing Bones, and I guess that's about it for this one. So tell me what you thought of Bones, if you wanted to see more, or if you thought if they did do more, what would happen to Jimmy Bones? Where would his story go? Do you even care? Who could have played Jimmy Bones better than Snoop Dogg? Probably a lot of people, but I love me some Snoop Dogg, but not in this. But that's about it for this week's video. Hope you enjoyed it. Let me know down below. Like and subscribe, do all that good stuff, and I'll see you in a little while for another great video. Thanks, guys. Bye.